The chandeliers of the Grant Foundation Gala burned like a constellation suspended above a world that had never felt farther away from him. Silver-dressed socialites drifted across the ballroom, their laughter rising and falling like waves against the walls of glass and gold. Cameras flashed, champagne sparkled. A string quartet swelled into a haunting overture as the lights dimmed. Then a single spotlight cracked open the darkness. It fell on a young woman standing utterly still at the center of the marble stage. Mira Dalton, barefoot, breath held, eyes raised toward something only she could see. The audience leaned in as a hush ran over the room. A whisper spread through the front row like a chill. Is that the piece Caleb Grant died performing? Is she really doing that? A couple near the podium gasped softly. Someone else muttered that this was madness and disrespectful. A journalist scribbled frantic notes, and in the far right corner of the ballroom, half hidden behind a forest of expensive suits and glittering gowns, sat the man who should have never been here tonight. Elias Grant, 36 years old, billionaire tech visionary, board director, face of half a dozen philanthropic empires, and now a man who could not stand, not even for a second. His wheelchair was a custom frame of carbon and titanium metal, so light it barely hummed when pushed, but still heavy enough to remind him every day of the weight he could not escape. The spotlight caught the edges of the wheels, panning along the cold black surface like it was photographing a crime scene. The music began. A single note, sharp, naked, dangerous. Mira lifted her arms. The first movement struck through the room. Her body curved and folded with terrifying honesty. Not graceful, not delicate, raw. The murmurs rose again. That is the choreography Caleb danced the night he collapsed. Does she know? Is she trying to provoke him? Elias heard every word. He always did. His jaw tensed until it ached. His fingers dug into the armrest as if the world were slipping out from under him. A man standing behind him whispered to his wife, in a voice that was meant to be quiet but carried like smoke. That is the CEO who cannot walk anymore and whose brother died for him. The humiliation lanced through him like a familiar and unwelcome knife. He exhaled, but it came out as something closer to a fragile shake. The muscles in his legs twitched, involuntary, violent. A reminder of 7 surgeries that promised more than they delivered. 2 pale scars carved down the line of his left calf caught the shimmering light as if begging the room to look. He felt it happening again. The pull, the memory, the night that destroyed him. On stage, the dancer spun into a rapid turn and the world blurred. For a heartbeat, Elias did not see Mira. He saw Caleb, his older brother, his anchor, his hero, the man who shielded him from the explosion, meant to kill them both. Caleb falling under the collapsing scaffolding of the backstage rig. Caleb reaching for him even as the flames rose. Caleb dying so he could live. His breath caught in his throat. The room tilted. A bass note thundered across the stage. Mira leapt and landed with a force that seemed impossible in her small frame. The spotlight fractured into white shards over her skin, and something broke open in Elias. Stop, please, stop. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it felt too loud for him, too naked. His vision pulsed, his legs shook again. Memories shoved themselves to the surface, like they had been waiting for this exact moment to rip him apart. The panic climbed fast, ruthless and merciless, like it had been training for this night. He did not belong here. He never should have come. Mira did not stop. Her movements slowed into a final series of gestures, soft, intimate, heartbreakingly tender, as if she were speaking to someone who had forgotten how to listen. The final note faded. Silence wrapped the room. No applause, no breath. Mira straightened and turned her head. She saw him, really saw him. And in 3 bold steps, she crossed the stage, climbed down, and walked directly toward the man everyone else stared at like a tragedy on display. The crowd parted without thinking. Someone hissed her name. Someone else muttered that she had gone too far. But Mira kept moving. Elias tried to look away, but she was already kneeling in front of him, bringing herself to his eye level as if acknowledging him was more important than acknowledging any rule in this room. Her voice was soft but steady. Your legs did not betray you, Elias. Your fear did. His breath punched out of him. He had spent 2 years hiding behind silence wealth armor and walls no one could breach. And this young dancer shattered all of it with one sentence. The orchestra conductor called her back sharply. She ignored him. The crowd watched with the morbid fascination of people who had paid for a glamorous night and were suddenly given something real instead. Elias forced his hands against the wheels, wanting to escape, before the entire room saw his face crumble. Mira whispered again, "You are still alive, Elias, even if you forgot how to feel it." His chest tightened, his throat closed. The air turned thick around him. He pushed the wheels of his chair hard, too hard. The wheels squealed against the polished marble floor as he shoved himself away from her, away from the spotlight, away from the spectators who would spend weeks gossiping about this moment. Mira stood slowly, her expression unreadable, as Elias disappeared into the shadowed corridor beyond the ballroom. Her fingertips trembled. The orchestra resumed playing, as if pretending they could erase what had happened. The guests pretended too. They always did. But every single person in that room knew one truth without speaking it. Something irreversible had just been set in motion. And nothing, not wealth, not fear, not the walls Elias had spent years building, would be able to stop it now. Mira Dalton had never believed in destiny, but as she stepped out of the Grant Foundation gala and into the cold Manhattan night, the air tasted like something had shifted, something irreversible and frighteningly alive. She wrapped her worn denim jacket around her sequined costume, ignoring the ironic contrast, because she had learned long ago that survival rarely looked elegant. A cluster of reporters were still gathered near the valet, whispering about the scene inside, and whether the dancer had deliberately provoked Elias Grant for attention. Mira kept her head down and walked past them without a word, but her pulse throbbed with the weight of everything she had seen in Elias' eyes. She had not expected him to be there tonight. That alone would have stopped any sane performer from choosing Caleb Grant's final piece, a choreography drenched in grief beauty and the echoes of a life cut short. She had chosen it because it represented something entirely different to her. A rebirth, a man fighting the darkness inside him, a spirit refusing to stay buried beneath pain. She had no idea that this piece belonged to the kind of tragedy people only whispered about when they thought no one could hear. If she had known, maybe she would have prepared herself. For the moment the spotlight revealed Elias in his wheelchair, looking like a man made of shadows and unfinished stories. But she had not known, and now she could not forget. The way his legs shook, the way his eyes followed the choreography, like each step dragged a buried memory back into daylight. the way guilt carved itself into the rigid set of his jaw. She had seen men in pain before, but not like this, not wrapped in steel wealth and silence. As she reached the subway entrance, the memory of her own pain stirred. 4 years earlier, she had been a rising star in the East Coast Contemporary Academy, a dancer praised for her control precision and fearlessness, until one careless moment, one jealous whisper, one sabotaged cable line changed everything. She had fallen from a suspended hoop in the middle of rehearsal, crashing onto the stage in a scream she could not remember making. Doctors told her the ligaments tore like thin paper. They told her she would walk but never dance the same, not with the same fire, not with the same fluidity, not with the same freedom. Her body healed slower than her anger. Her life had become a map of compromises, performances, in small venues teaching part-time working, late shifts at the diner near her apartment. She learned to move again, not the way critics celebrated, but the way people clawed their way back from trauma, forcing their bodies to speak when their hearts wanted to stay silent. That was why she had started teaching movement therapy in a tiny studio 2 blocks from her apartment, guiding children who flinched from loud sounds and war veterans who could not sleep through the night without seeing ghosts. Dance had brought Mira back, not to who she used to be, but to someone who understood how fragile resilience really was. And that was why she had walked toward Elias without fear, because she recognized the drowning look long before she recognized the billionaire. The next morning, her name was trending across social media, not in celebration, in ridicule. Headlines flashed across her cracked phone screen. Dancer crosses the line with disabled billionaire. Unprofessional performance at charity gala. Mira Dalton storms stage and confronts Grant Eyre. The comments were worse. Some accused her of exploiting his trauma. Some said she should be banned from future galas. A few defended her, but their voices were drowned by the noise. At the studio, her supervisor asked to speak with her in private. The board is worried about publicity. Parents have already emailed. Maybe take a break for a few weeks. Mira clenched her fists, trying not to let the sting show. She loved those kids. She loved helping them breathe through their fear because she knew exactly what fear did when it rotted inside a person. She nodded silently and packed up her things while her coworkers whispered behind closed doors. Shame tasted metallic at the back of her throat. She stepped outside the studio feeling empty and heavy all at once. The city traffic hummed like a restless pulse. A busker played a melancholy violin piece near the corner, and Mira paused, letting the notes wash over her like rain. She thought of Elias, his haunted eyes, his shaking legs, the invisible disaster humming under his skin. She had seen something the entire room of wealthy guests had missed because they were too busy watching the scandal and not the man. His hands had trembled, not from anger but from memory. His breath had stuttered like someone trying to outrun a nightmare. His silence had been a fortress built out of guilt, not arrogance, and she knew in her bones that he was someone who had been hurting for far longer than any headline could grasp. Before she even realized what she was doing, she walked toward the Grant Mansion, located on the upper stretch of Fifth Avenue, where the houses looked like museums pretending to be homes. She knew she would not be allowed inside. She did not need to be. She simply wanted him to know that the world did not end last night, even if it felt like it did. A security guard stepped forward the moment she reached the iron gate. "Miss Dalton, the family is not receiving visitors." She offered a small, understanding nod. "I know. I am not here to intrude. Could you please give him this?" She held out a small folded note. The guard frowned clearly, reluctant, but something in her expression must have softened him because he took it. "I cannot guarantee he will read it." She managed a tired smile. "He does not need to, but please give it to him anyway." She turned away before the guard could say anything more. The note was simple, only one sentence. "I danced because I did not see your wheelchair. I saw a man drowning." That night in the Grant mansion, Elias sat in his darkened study, unable to make sense of the storm in his mind. The gala played on loop in his head, the spotlight, the whispers, the memory of Caleb falling the dancer, kneeling in front of him and speaking a truth no one else dared to. He had not slept. He had not moved from the same spot for hours. His phone buzzed with messages from board members concerned about optics. Marcus, his assistant, sent updates about headlines growing by the minute. None of it reached him. Not really. He stared at the flames in the fireplace until they blurred. Then the guard walked in, hesitating. "Sir, someone left this for you." A note. Elias almost did not take it, but something compelled his hand to move. He unfolded the paper. "I danced because I did not see your wheelchair. I saw a man drowning." Elias closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, something in him shifted, something small but undeniable. Someone had seen him, not the broken billionaire, not the man in the chair, not the tragedy, but him. The ember of that truth flickered quietly in the dark. It should not have mattered. It should not have reached him. But it did. And it would change everything. Elias Grant had spent 2 years mastering the art of shutting the world out. But the note Mira left for him refused to fade from his thoughts. No matter how many times he tried to bury it under work silence or the sterile glow of the monitors in his study. By the 3rd morning after the gala, he had slept less than 4 hours total, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw 2 things: Mira kneeling in front of him, and Caleb falling in that blinding shard of memory he still could not tame. Marcus, his assistant, had grown increasingly worried, pacing the perimeter of the office, as if waiting for the next crisis to detonate. "Sir, the press will run, whatever narrative makes them money, but crisis control is possible if you make a statement." Elias gave no response. Marcus paused. "Or if you meet with the dancer." Elias snapped his attention toward him so sharply Marcus flinched. "Why would I do that?" "Because you are thinking about her," Marcus said before he could swallow the words, "and because she clearly knows something everyone else misses, and you hate that you know it too." Elias should have fired him right then and there. Instead, he stared at the city skyline, stretching beyond the glass wall. The world he once owned, now feeling like a distant planet. "Bring her here, today." Marcus blinked. "Sir, she might not accept the invitation given the headlines." "Then make it not an invitation, make it an arrangement, a practical one. Something his pride would normally cling to." Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. An hour later, Mira stood in the marble foyer of the Grant mansion. Her posture steady, but her pulse stumbling in her chest. She had not expected this. She had been walking home from the grocery store when a black car rolled to a stop beside the curb, and a sharply dressed man stepped out. Asking her to come with him to meet Elias Grant, she hesitated for 2 reasons, the first being simple survival, and the second being the strange tug-low in her ribcage that whispered this was unfinished. Marcus treated her with polite distance, but she could tell he was assessing her every move, not unkindly, just cautious. The mansion was too quiet, too immaculate, too heavy with secrets. When the doors to the study opened, Elias was not seated behind his desk as she expected, but near the window, the morning light casting a soft glow across his face, exposing the faintest tremor in his hands. He did not greet her. He simply waited until the door clicked shut behind her, then spoke with a voice that sounded unused. "Why did you dance that piece?" Mira swallowed and told him the truth. "Because it is about rebirth, not tragedy. I danced it hoping someone in the room needed it." "I did not know that someone was you." He winced at that, the way a person winces when a tender bruise is pressed. Elias motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit." She sat. He looked at her like a man examining a map he did not remember drawing. "I want you to teach me." Her brows rose. "Teach you what? How to dance?" Elias let out a sound, somewhere between a humorless laugh and a frustrated breath. "Not dance. Feel. I want to reconnect with my legs. I want to understand them again. Not to walk. Not for pity or spectacle, but to feel. Because I do not. Not anymore." It was the closest thing to vulnerability he had shown anyone, and Mira felt the air shift between them. She knew what he was asking. Not physical therapy, not medical instruction, something else, something deeper, somatic work, trust work, trauma work, work that could break him open or break her if she was not careful. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why not a specialist?" He looked down at his hands. "Specialists treat my body. You saw past it. You saw everything I am trying to hide." Mira exhaled slowly, anchoring herself before she answered. "If I say yes, there are rules." Elias nodded once as if bracing for a contract negotiation. "First, you tell me the truth, always, even when it is ugly. Second, you do not use your power to manipulate me. Not as a student, not as a man who can buy anything. Third, you do not quit when it hurts emotionally or physically. If you want this to work, you have to meet yourself where you are not where the world expects you to be." Elias looked at her as if hearing a foreign language that somehow made perfect sense. "Agreed." Mira hesitated. "One more thing. When I work with you, I touch your legs. You need to understand that this will trigger a lot of emotion, maybe despair, maybe anger. If you cannot let me in the smallest bit, I cannot help you." Elias stared at his legs as if they belonged to someone else. "Try it." Mira moved slowly, deliberately kneeling before him, just as she had done the night of the gala, but this time without an audience, without judgment, without anything but the tremble of truth between them. She placed her hands gently on his left thigh. He jerked back, sucking in a breath as if struck. She held still, not retreating, not pushing, just being. His jaw tightened. "You see, this is why this will not work." Mira shook her head lightly. "This is why it must." She guided his breathing softly as if coaxing a wound into opening. "Breathe into the discomfort, not away from it. Feel it. Name it." He tried. His breath shuddered. His eyes glossed with something he refused to let fall. He wanted to hide. He wanted to disappear. Instead, he stayed. When she lifted her hands, he looked exhausted and raw, but not defeated. Mira rose to her feet. "Somatic work is messy. It is not graceful, but your body remembers even when you do not." Elias stared at her like she had said something impossible. Marcus appeared at the door. "Sir Professor Halden is on the line waiting for the project update." Elias did not look away from Mira. "Cancel it." Marcus blinked at the order but obeyed. Mira took a step toward the door. We can start tomorrow morning if you are certain about this. Elias spoke quietly. I am certain about nothing, but I know I felt something for the first time in a long time. And I want to try again. Mira nodded, her heart unexpectedly soft. Then we begin tomorrow. She left the study, and as the door closed behind her, Elias exhaled a trembling breath he did not know he had been holding. Something had shifted. Something had cracked open. For the first time since Caleb died, Elias felt the faintest trace of movement, not in his legs, but in his soul. And he knew this would change everything, even if he was terrified of what that meant. The next morning, Manhattan woke up to the metallic chill of early winter, the kind that made the air taste sharp and unforgiving. But inside the Grant mansion, a different kind of tension settled, one quieter, yet far more dangerous. Elias had been awake since before dawn, staring at the ceiling, counting each tremor that rippled through his legs, with the precision of a man cataloging his failures. Mira arrived exactly at 9, stepping quietly into the sunlit room, transformed into their training space. The rug had been rolled back, revealing polished wood floors, and the walls had been cleared of everything except a mirror that reflected two people who had no idea how profoundly they were about to change each other. "Good morning," she said, her tone steady but warm. Elias nodded, though the stiffness in his posture betrayed the storm inside him. "I did not sleep." "That is all right," she replied, taking off her coat. "Healing rarely begins on a rested mind." She asked him to transfer from his wheelchair to the padded mat on the floor, something he had done countless times with nurses and therapists, but today it felt different. Today it felt like stepping into a battlefield without armor. His hands trembled on the wheel locks, but he managed to lower himself onto the mat, eyes fixed on the horizon of the room, like he was bracing for an impact that might never end. Mira knelt in front of him. "Before we begin, I need you to promise one thing." "What?" "That you will not apologize for anything your body does. Not a flinch, not a tremor, not a shake. Trauma lives inside reactions you cannot control. We work with them, not against them." Elias swallowed hard. He nodded. Mira guided him through grounding exercises, first letting him feel the mat beneath him, the pressure points in his hips, the weight distribution of his upper body. His jaw clenched each time a muscle spasmed, but she did not let him retreat into silence. "Tell me what you feel." "Shame," he muttered. "Anger, uselessness." Mira shook her head gently. "Those are judgments, not sensations. What does your body feel?" Elias glared at her because she was right, and he hated that she was right. "Tightness," he said finally. "Heat in my thighs, pins in my calves, pressure in my spine." "That is your nervous system waking up," she said softly. "These are not enemies, they are messengers." His breath wavered, and she could see the fear behind his eyes. The fear of hoping for something he had lost. The fear of letting someone witness the rawness he had hidden for years. She shifted closer. "I am going to touch your legs now. Slow. You tell me to stop if you need to." She began at his knee, applying gentle pressure, mapping the pathways of sensation, like a cartographer exploring ruined territory. Elias sucked in a sharp breath as his muscles twitched violently. Mira kept her voice calm. "Breathe all the way down to where it hurts. Let your breath meet the pain." He tried. His breath broke. His shoulders shook. He looked away, ashamed. Mira reached out and drew his gaze back. "Elias, you are allowed to feel this. It does not make you weak. It makes you human." Something fractured inside him at those words. Because he had not felt human, since the night Caleb died, and the world rewrote him into a symbol of tragedy. For the first time, he let the tremor run through him instead of fighting it. After 20 minutes, he was drenched in sweat and trembling like he had survived a storm. Mira offered him water, and he drank with shaking hands. "You are doing better than you think," she murmured. "Better than you realize." He almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to disbelief. "That was just pain," he said. "Maybe," she answered. "But sometimes pain is the doorway." They moved into breath-synchronized exercises, Mira counting slowly, while Elias followed each inhale and exhale, trying to connect breath to sensation. It was grueling, but something strange happened halfway through the session. His left thigh twitched, not from panic, not from shock, but from recognition, as if a long, silent wire in his body had flickered with a forgotten signal. Elias stilled. "Did you see that?" Mira nodded, her eyes glimmering with the quiet intensity of someone who had witnessed a miracle before. "That was your body remembering." He looked at his leg as if seeing an old friend. The memory hit him like a wave. Playing football with Caleb in their backyard, running barefoot across the beach, standing on the balcony of their old house, feeling the wind in his bones. The loss of those memories tightened his throat. Mira noticed. "Movement is not just physical," she said. "It is emotional. You have stored years of grief in your body, and your body wants to let it go." He could not speak. He felt too exposed, too fragile, too alive. They continued working for another hour, and by the time Mira signaled the end of the session, Elias felt both wrung out and strangely lighter. He expected her to leave immediately, but instead she sat on the floor beside him, her legs crossed, her voice softening. "I know what it feels like to be betrayed by your own body," she said. "To have everyone tell you what you will never be again. To look in the mirror and not recognize the person looking back." Elias turned toward her, the question forming before he could stop it. "What happened to you?" She hesitated, as if weighing how much of her story he deserved. Then she spoke. "I fell during a rehearsal 4 years ago. Someone had tampered with the equipment. I shattered part of my knee. They told me it would take months to walk, and maybe years to dance, if at all. I thought my life was over." She looked at her hands, the memory still sharp. "But my mother took me to a class for trauma survivors. They taught me to feel movement again, not with perfection, but with permission. Permission to feel broken and still continue." Her voice cracked just slightly. "That is how I learned the body wants to remember, even when the mind wants to forget." Elias listened, not just with attention, but with something deeper, something like recognition. For the first time since their work began, he felt a shift inside him. Not the familiar heaviness of despair, but a trembling beginning of trust. The session ended around noon, and Mira stood stretching her limbs with dancer grace. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. Elias nodded, though his muscles ached. As she walked toward the door, a brief power outage flickered, the lights plunging the room into shadows. Mira paused, turning back toward him, the glow from the window outlining her silhouette. In the dimness, her voice softened to something intimate. "Do not fear the dark, Elias. Your body can still find its way, even when the lights go out." Then she left. And as the door closed, Elias realized something quietly devastating. For the first time in years, he was not afraid of tomorrow, because tomorrow meant she would return. Elias woke before sunrise, the next day, haunted by a memory that had not visited him in months. The ringing echo of an explosion, the taste of burning metal. the crushing weight of someone's body, shielding his own, and above all, Caleb's voice saying a single line he had never been able to forget. "Stay with me, little brother. Stay awake, stay alive." The memory twisted in his dreams until he jerked upright, drenched in sweat, his breath stumbling unevenly. He braced his hands on the mattress, trying to steady the tremor ricocheting through his arms. He hated mornings like this mornings that pulled the past back to life with claws. By the time Mira arrived, he had half swallowed the panic, but not enough to hide the exhaustion beneath his eyes. She noticed instantly, though she did not comment. Instead, she placed her bag down quietly and said only one line in that gentle, grounded voice of hers, "Ready when you are." He nodded and transferred onto the mat, but today something felt heavier in the air. Mira saw it in the way his shoulders curled slightly inward, the way his gaze kept drifting away, as if pulled by shadows only he could see. She knelt across from him, waiting until he finally spoke. "I had a nightmare." She did not rush him. She simply waited. Elias looked down at his hands, which were clasped so tightly the knuckles had turned pale. "It was not a nightmare," he corrected softly. "It was a memory." Mira let the silence stretch, giving him space. Elias inhaled a shaky breath. "I never told anyone what really happened the night my brother died. The police report was clean, and the news said it was an accident, and even Marcus thinks I cannot remember the details, but I remember everything." Mira remained still, her presence solid enough for him to lean on without touching. Elias closed his eyes, and the past surged forward. 2 years ago, I was supposed to meet Caleb backstage before the charity performance. He was dancing that piece, the final one he choreographed. He was nervous. He never got nervous. Elias swallowed. "I heard something unusual in the storage hall behind the stage. A sound like metal being dragged. When I went to check, the door locked behind me. There were men there waiting. They attacked me. They kept shouting questions about grant tech files and the acquisition Caleb was overseeing. They thought I was him. I tried to fight, but one of them slammed my back into a metal crate, hard. I could not breathe. Everything blurred." He paused, squeezing his eyes shut, as the memory tightened around him. "Caleb found me. He must have sensed something was wrong, because he came earlier than planned. He tried to get me out of there, but the men panicked. One pulled a gun. Another kicked over a lighting unit. Sparks hit the floor. Flammable solution spilled from a broken container. The fire spread so fast I barely saw it happen." Mira's breath caught, but she did not interrupt. Elias continued, voice trembling. "Caleb pushed me toward the exit. I do not know how he lifted me, but he did, even though the smoke was everywhere. I tried to tell him to leave me. He refused. He never refused me anything. But when the scaffolding collapsed, he shoved me out of its path. He took the hit, not me." His voice cracked the truth, finally tearing through the steel walls he had built around it. "He died because he chose me. Not because it was fate, not because it was an accident. Because he loved me more than his own life. And I was helpless. I could not save him. I could not even stand." Mira felt the weight of his guilt like a living thing between them, heavy, suffocating, ancient. She shifted closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elias, you survived something catastrophic. That does not make you guilty. If he had not come for me," Elias said hollowly, "he would still be alive." He looked at her finally, eyes full of raw grief. "He died in front of me, Mira. His hand was still on my shoulder when they found us." Mira's heart cracked at the vulnerability in him, the kind of naked grief people hide for years until it calcifies. She reached out slowly, giving him time to retreat if he needed. When he did not, she placed her hand lightly over his trembling one. You did not cause the fire, Elias. You did not choose whose life was taken, and you did not fail your brother. His breath faltered, but Mira squeezed his hand gently. You loved him. That is what mattered to him. Not how you stood or fought or fell. Not whether you walked out or crawled. He chose to protect you. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice. His face shifted, the hard lines softening as if her words were carving a small space free inside him. He looked down at their joined hands, then at her. I have never spoken about this. The investigators did not push. The board wanted it buried. Everyone told me to move on. I pretended to. But his voice broke entirely. How do you move on from the person who saved your life? By giving up his. Mira's voice was steady, warm, and achingly sincere. You do not move on. You move with. You carry him. In every breath, every choice, every step, whether you walk them or not. The air grew thick with emotion, both of them suspended, in a moment neither expected, but both desperately needed. Mira spoke again softly. Tell me what your body feels right now. Elias tried to answer, but his throat closed. She guided him. Not your grief, your body, what does it feel? He exhaled, unsteady. Heat in my chest, pressure in my throat, tremor in my left hand, tightness in my spine. She nodded. Lift the emotion off of it. Just feel the sensation. Let it exist without attaching meaning. He obeyed, focusing on the physical instead of the memory. Slowly, the tremor in his hand eased. The tightness softened. Mira guided him through slow, sustained breathing, deep enough to shake loose the grief stored in his muscles. His eyes burned, but no longer with shame. For the first time in 2 years, the pain was not a weapon against him. It was a truth he could finally speak. When the session ended, he looked exhausted, but lighter. Mira gathered her things. Elias watched her with something like gratitude and fear braided together. Before she reached the door, he spoke quietly, almost like a confession. Thank you for hearing what no one else could handle. She turned her head, the afternoon light catching the gold flecks in her eyes. You do not heal alone, Elias. No one should. She left the room, but the echo of her presence lingered, a steady warmth, settling in the coldest place inside him. For the first time since Caleb's death, Elias no longer felt like a ghost living in a borrowed body. He felt like a man beginning to return. And it terrified him, but it also made him breathe. The world outside the Grant mansion moved faster than either of them realized, and by the end of that week, the quiet sanctuary Mira and Elias had built inside those sunlit training rooms, shattered under the weight of a headline neither of them saw coming. It began with a single photograph taken through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the studio, a photograph showing Mira kneeling beside Elias, guiding his breathing, her hand on his chest as he struggled through a tremor. It was a private moment, raw, human, and painfully tender. But once it hit the internet, it transformed into something twisted by strangers hungry for scandal. The headline spread like wildfire. Dancer seduces disabled billionaire during private sessions. Underneath it, the comments were vicious. Who does she think she is? She is using him for fame. He is lonely. She is taking advantage. Classic gold digger move. The cruelty stunned Mira when she woke to dozens of notifications vibrating her phone off her nightstand. Her stomach dropped as she scrolled through the posts, her face pale with disbelief. Her inbox filled with messages from unknown accounts, some mocking, some threatening, some telling her to disappear. She tried to steady her breath, but fear crawled through her in cold prickles. When she arrived at the studio where she taught trauma therapy, the air felt wrong. Too quiet, too watchful. Her supervisor stepped out with a look Mira recognized immediately. A look of someone rehearsing a difficult speech. "Mira, maybe you should take an extended leave. Parents are concerned. They do not want their children involved in anything controversial." Mira blinked as if the words could rearrange themselves into something less devastating. "I have not done anything wrong. It is just a photo taken out of context." The supervisor sighed. "I know, and some of us believe you, but we cannot risk losing donations over a scandal. You understand?" She did understand. That was the worst part. She nodded slowly, gathered her things, and walked out of the building without daring to look back. Outside, she leaned against the brick wall and pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from shaking. She had survived humiliations before, but this one struck deeper because this one tried to shame not just her past, but the very work she did to help others heal. Meanwhile, in the Grant mansion, Marcus burst into Elias' office looking frantic. "Sir, you need to see this." Elias did not need to see it. He had already seen it. Marcus projected the headline onto the office screen anyway, the photograph enlarged to a grotesque scale. Elias stared at it, the muscles in his jaw taut. He recognized the moment captured. He remembered the tremor that had shaken him so fiercely he could barely speak, the way Mira guided him through the storm with steady hands and patient grounding. To see it turned into something sordid, twisted sickness in his chest. "The media has run with it," Marcus said. "The board wants to know if you want to press charges or issue a public statement. Some outlets are implying she is manipulating you. Others are implying you are having an affair." Elias shot him a cold, sharp look. "This is neither manipulation nor an affair. This is therapy. This is healing." Marcus hesitated, then chose his next words carefully. "Sir, if the story grows, it could affect your company. The next acquisition, even the philanthropic branches. You know how the public reads stories like this. She is being torn apart online." Elias' eyes darkened at those words. "Bring me my phone." Marcus frowned, unsure, but obeyed. Before Elias could dial Mira's number, Mira stood outside the gates of his mansion, desperate to warn him not to contact her. The guard recognized her, but hesitated clearly, unsure whether to let her step closer. "I need to speak to Elias," she said, voice tight with urgency. The guard's expression softened, but his duty held firm. "He is in meetings, Miss Dalton. Is everything all right?" "No." She inhaled a shaky breath. "Someone took a picture of our session. It is everywhere. People think I crossed a line I would never cross. He does not need this. Not now. I need to tell him that I will fix it or disappear if that is what will protect him." The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. "I will let him know you are here." A moment later, a black car rolled down the driveway, the tinted window lowering enough for her to see Elias inside, his expression carved in stone concern, simmering beneath the surface. "Get in," he said. His tone left no room for argument. She slid into the car, the scent of leather and cold air surrounding her. Elias studied her with a depth that made her chest tighten. "You are shaking." She forced a small laugh, but it cracked. "I lost my job, my reputation, my students, everything because someone took a picture of us during a moment that never should have been seen." Elias' expression hardened. "None of that is your fault. The world is cruel, Mira. especially to women who dare to stand near power, especially to anyone who helps someone like me. But you did nothing wrong. She turned toward him, eyes stinging. I should distance myself until it blows over. You have too much at stake. Your company, your reputation, your life. I cannot be the reason it all falls apart. He inhaled sharply. Do not do that. Do not pretend you are the problem. She clenched her fists. But I am the one they are tearing apart. Yes, he said, voice low. Because they think you can be broken. Because they think they can shame you into disappearing. He leaned forward, eyes fierce. If you walk away, they win. If you crumble, they win. Do not fight for me like I am fragile, Mira said. Fight with me. He looked at her, stunned by the fire in her voice. She met his gaze, steady and unshaken. I will not be your scandal. If I stay, it has to be because you want me here, not because you need damage control. Elias stared at her long enough to feel the truth strike something deep inside him. I want you here, he said quietly, not to fight the world, to fight myself, to keep learning to feel. Her breath trembled. And what about everything else? The headlines, the board, the public. Let them talk, he said, voice like steel. They already took my legs. They will not take the person helping me learn to live again. The car rolled to a stop in front of the mansion, and for a long moment neither moved. The world outside continued roaring with rumors and cruelty. But inside that car, something else lived, something fragile, something real, something neither of them fully understood yet. Mira spoke softly. Then we face this together. Elias nodded once. Yes, together. And with that single word, the world shifted again. Not out of malice this time, but out of the fragile, undeniable truth, growing between them, a truth strong enough to stand, even when everything else tried to tear them apart. The following week unfolded with a kind of emotional gravity. Neither of them had been trained to withstand, and each session felt like stepping deeper into a landscape made of old wounds and newly awakened nerves. By now, the world outside had grown even louder, the headlines turning crueler, the paparazzi clustering around the gates, like vultures waiting for fresh weakness. But inside the training room, there was a different storm, one woven of breath, trembling breakthroughs, and a connection neither Elias nor Mira dared to name. On the fifth morning, Elias transferred onto the mat with a steadiness Mira had not seen before, a steady determination beneath the exhaustion etched into his eyes. Mira knelt across from him, feeling every subtle shift in the energy between them. You look stronger, she said gently. He shook his head. I feel like I am falling apart. She smiled softly. That is usually when the breakthrough comes. They started with somatic grounding, Mira guiding him through the familiar rhythm of breath-mapping pressure and sensation. But today, his body responded differently. Mira touched along his left thigh, guiding his awareness downward, and he inhaled sharply, not from pain, but from a flicker of something else, something almost electric. There, she whispered, do not run from it, stay. He clenched his jaw, trying to breathe through the sensation, as his muscles twitched beneath her palms. I feel it, he managed, voice strained. I actually feel it. For weeks, sensation had been unpredictable, scattered like broken shards, but this was different. This was intentional, connected, awake. Mira's eyes glistened with quiet hope. Follow it, Elias. Let it move. His breath released in a shaky exhale, and his fingers curled into the mat, grounding himself as the sensation rippled further down his leg. He could not believe it. For 2 years he had lived in a body that felt like a locked house, But now tiny windows were cracking open, letting in light. The miracle of it stunned him. At that exact moment, the lights flickered from the remnants of last night's storm, and the room darkened just enough for the moment to feel suspended. Mira moved closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her breath brushing his cheek. "You are not imagining this," she murmured. "Your body is waking up." Something inside him buckled with the weight of emotion. Sudden, fierce, overwhelming. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the tears escaped anyway. Tears he had refused to let fall since Caleb's death. Mira saw. It saw the grief breaking through the same way sensation was breaking through, and she did not look away. She stayed right there, steady, unafraid. The moment stretched fragile and reverent. Elias whispered, "I cannot do this." Mira shook her head. "Yes, you can. You are doing it." He felt something inside him shatter, not painfully, but necessarily, a cracking open of everything he had carried alone for too long. Grief, fear, guilt, every buried emotion surged through him, and his breath broke into ragged pieces. Mira guided him closer, her hands finding his shoulders, grounding him through the tremor that seized his chest. "Stay with your breath," she said softly. "Stay with me." For the first time in 2 years, he did not try to run from the panic. He let it move, let it shake, let it spill out. Mira reached behind him, sliding her arms around his torso, holding him steady as the tremor shook through him. Elias let out a sound he had never allowed another human to hear. Not since the night of the fire, a sound of breaking, a sound of a man trying to come back to life through the ashes. "I am here," Mira said, voice near his ear. "You are not falling. You are releasing." His breath began to sync with hers, the violent tremors slowing until he sagged against her, utterly drained. She did not let go. She stayed holding him through the shuddering aftermath. When the trembling subsided, he whispered into the space between them, "I am scared of what you see when you look at me." Mira tightened her hold slightly, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to steady. "I see a man trying to rise," she said. "A man who has survived what would have destroyed most people. A man worth every moment I spend in this room." Elias let out a shaky laugh, one edged with disbelief and fragile gratitude. "You deserve someone who stands on his own feet," he whispered. Mira drew back just enough to meet his gaze, her eyes soft, fierce, and unbearably honest. "Standing is optional," she said. "Healing is not." Something inside him melted at that, at the gentleness and conviction in her voice, the recognition that she saw him beneath the wheelchair, beneath the wealth, beneath the scars. She saw him, and he had spent years believing no one ever would again. They returned to the exercises, but the air between them had changed, becoming charged with something unspoken, something warm and trembling. Mira asked him to shift weight into his hips, stabilizing his core as she guided pressure into his thigh. His breath hitched. "Try to lift your left knee," she said softly. "Not physically, just intention. The intention is the spark." Elias' focused eyes narrowing in concentration. Mira placed a hand behind his thigh, stabilizing the joint. When he inhaled deeply, a subtle shift happened, the faintest contraction of a muscle long dormant. Mira gasped a soft, stunned sound. "Elias, do that again." He tried, and this time the contraction was stronger, almost visible. Mira's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God! Oh, Elias!" His eyes widened. Was that real? Mira nodded, tears welling. It was absolutely real. His breath shook. "I felt that. I actually felt that." Mira rushed forward, without thinking, cupping his face in both hands. her forehead brushing his. "You did it, Elias. You did it." His hands instinctively lifted, finding her waist, steadying himself against the flood of feeling in his chest. Their faces were inches apart, the air between them charged fragile, trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. For a single suspended heartbeat, he leaned in, drawn by relief, gratitude, and something achingly human, a longing he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Mira froze breath, catching the moment, hanging like a held note. Then Elias stopped himself, pulling back sharply, as if yanked by an invisible chain. "No," his voice cracked. "You deserve someone whole, someone who does not need to be lifted off the floor." Mira's expression fell, her eyes flickering with hurt she tried to mask. She stood slowly, pulling her hands away, though her fingers trembled. "Physics does not determine wholeness, Elias. Neither does walking." He looked away, unable to bear the tenderness in her voice. She stepped back, giving him space, though the distance ached like a bruise. "I need some air," she whispered, and walked toward the door, her steps controlled, but not steady. Elias watched her leave, chest tight with regret and confusion. He hated himself for hurting her, but he feared the alternative more feared. Wanting something impossible, feared pulling her into the wreckage of his life. After she left, the silence pressed in around him, suffocating. Minutes passed, then hours. As night fell, he rolled back into the training room, able to stop replaying her expression, the hurt, the disappointment, the unspoken question of why he kept pushing her away when she had done nothing but pull him back to life. He stared at the spot where she had knelt earlier, her warmth still lingering, like an imprint burned into the air. "You are a coward," he whispered to himself. "You survived fire, but you are terrified of a woman who sees you." The self-loathing built until he snapped, pressing his palms to the mat. "I can do this," he said under his breath. One movement, one shift. For her. He tried to lift his weight from one arm to the other, but his muscles shook violently. He pushed harder, teeth gritted determination, laced with desperation. His elbow buckled, and he collapsed hard onto the floor, pain shooting up his side. The impact knocked the breath out of him, and panic rose like a tide. The room spun, his chest burned, his limbs twitched violently. His breath fractured into sharp gasps. Then footsteps rushed in. Mira burst through the doorway, hair-loosened cheeks, flushed as if she had run the entire length of the mansion. "Elias," she cried, falling to her knees beside him. "What happened?" His breath stuttered, panic wild in his eyes. "I tried," he forced out. "I thought I could. I thought I should." Mira gathered him into her arms from behind, anchoring him with her body. Her chest pressed to his back, her legs bracketing his trembling ones. "Elias, do not do this alone," she whispered fiercely. "You never have to do this alone." He gripped her forearm as if it were the only solid thing in the world. "I am not afraid of falling," he choked. "I am afraid of you seeing me fall." Mira rested her cheek against his temple, her voice breaking with emotion. "Then fall with me, Elias. We rise together." His breath synced with hers, slowly, painfully, until the panic receded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. He leaned back into her, unable to fight the truth any longer. He trusted her in a way that terrified him, trusted her with the pieces of himself he had buried so deeply he thought no one would ever touch them again. When the tremor finally faded, Mira stayed holding him through the quiet that followed her arms, a steady shelter around him. For the first time since the fire, since Caleb, since the world collapsed, Elias felt not just seen but held, and the realization shook him more than any breakthrough his body had made. He was no longer drowning alone. The morning after the collapse on the mat, the mansion felt unnervingly quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something neither of them could name. Elias barely slept, but not from nightmares this time. From the memory of Mira's arms around him, the steady anchor of her breath, guiding him back from the cliff edge. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the echo of her warmth, and it terrified him because it awakened something he had locked away so tightly he almost forgot it existed. When Mira arrived, she moved more carefully than usual, her expression composed, but her eyes carrying the lingering ache of last night's nearly shared confession. Still, she greeted him with the same gentle professionalism. Though the air between them hummed with unspoken questions, they resumed their work, but both sensed the shift, something deeper, more vulnerable, threading each movement. Halfway through the session, Mira asked him to shift weight into his core, and Elias felt that spark of muscle intention again. But this time it traveled further down his leg, like a small awakening. Mira gasped quietly. Elias, that is progress, real progress. Pride flickered through him, unexpected and fragile. He looked up to find her smiling, and for a moment the world felt warm. But the warmth lasted only seconds because Marcus burst into the room. Breathless, face-pale, eyes sharp. "Sir, we have a problem, a serious one." Mira froze, hands still hovering near Elias' leg, as the atmosphere thickened instantly. Marcus lowered his voice, but the tremor in it was unmistakable. Jameson Cross was released from federal custody this morning. Elias went still, the sensation he had just felt evaporating under a surge of cold dread. Mira looked between them, sensing the danger, even if she did not yet understand it. "Who is Jameson Cross?" she asked softly. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Elias for permission. Elias forced each word out like bitter pieces of the past resurfacing. Jameson Cross was the man who orchestrated the attack that left me like this, the attack that killed Caleb. Mira's breath hitched. "Why is he out?" Marcus swallowed. There was a procedural error in the chain of evidence. Technicality. They could not hold him. His attorneys are already making statements implying the Grants exaggerated the incident. They are positioning him as the victim of corporate sabotage. Mira felt the blow, as if someone had punched the air from her lungs. Elias stared at the floor muscles, tightening in a way that had nothing to do with physical tremors. For 2 years he lived believing Cross was locked away, unable to finish what he started. The thought of him free sent a cold pulse of fear through his spine. Mira stepped closer, instinctively protective. "What does this mean for you?" Elias lifted his gaze, and for the first time she saw something she had never seen in him. Pure, unfiltered fear. "It means he is coming back for what he lost, for revenge," Marcus added quietly. "And he has every reason to use the media scandal to his advantage. He will spread rumors about you both. He will try to provoke Elias publicly. He could even pursue you, Mira, as leverage." Mira's heart lurched. "Why me?" "Because Cross knows she matters to you," Elias said before he could stop himself, the honesty slipping out rough and raw. Mira's eyes widened, but she did not let him retreat from the truth. "If he comes after me, we deal with it together." But Elias shook his head instantly. "Absolutely not. If he threatens you, you step back from me entirely. Distance yourself, leave this house, end our sessions. I will not have you dragged into this hell." Mira felt the words cut deep, the instinct to protect him clashing with the instinct to stay. She forced her voice steady. You do not get to decide how much danger I can handle. But Elias raised his voice harsher than intended. I do when it is my fault you are in it. Mira stepped back, stung. Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, there is more. A rumor surfaced online this morning. Someone claims Mira is being paid to manipulate your rehabilitation, that she is after your fortune. Mira swallowed a wheeze of disbelief. Another rumor says the accident 2 years ago was staged and Caleb's death was part of a cover-up. Marcus added. The world shook beneath Elias. That was cross. It had to be. He was rewriting the narrative before it could destroy him. We need to tighten security, Marcus said, and possibly halt all your public appearances. Elias looked at Mira, the weight of the world collapsing between them. You need to leave the mansion until this settles. Mira's voice trembled, but not with fear, with anger. So you are sending me away to keep the world happy, to keep Cross from using me, to keep me from standing by you. You cannot protect me by erasing me. Elias' eyes softened, the anger bleeding into desperation. Mira, if anything happens to you because of me, I will never forgive myself. She shook her head slowly, tears burning at the back of her eyes. I am here because I choose to be, because we are not done, because your body, your heart, your grief are not finished speaking. Elias' voice cracked. Look what they are already doing to you. Look at what they will do now that Cross is free. Mira took a step forward, her voice fierce, even as it broke. I am not afraid of him. But Elias was, terrified, not of Cross himself, but of losing someone else, someone who had become the first light in his world since Caleb's death. He could not bear another loss, not her, not now. Mira exhaled sharply, turning away, before the emotion in her eyes spilled over. I need air, she whispered, and left the training room without waiting for permission. She walked down the hallway, heart pounding, then out the front door into the cold morning. She stood on the steps, shivering from something deeper than wind. Minutes passed, then an hour. She knew she should go home, but her feet refused to move. She cared for Elias more than she could admit, even to herself. She did not want to leave him. Inside, Elias rolled into the darkened studio, unable to breathe through the crushing guilt. He stared at the mat where Mira had worked with him every day, where she had held him, cried with him, seen him when he could barely see himself. He whispered into the emptiness, I cannot lose anyone else. He did not know how long he sat there until he heard footsteps returning. Mira's silhouette appeared in the doorway, her face pale but resolute. I am not leaving, she said quietly. Not because I am fearless, not because I am foolish, but because healing does not stop for fear, and neither do I. Elias felt something in his chest crack open painfully. Mira continued, voice trembling but steady. If Cross is a threat, then we face him the same way. We face everything in this room, breath by breath, together. You do not choose my safety by sending me away. You choose it by letting me stay. Elias stared at her, unable to speak, the complicated storm of gratitude, fear, and devotion overwhelming him. She stepped inside, gently closing the door behind her. Let us finish today's session, she said, because your body does not pause for danger. It speaks through it. Elias nodded slowly, forcing himself to focus. She guided him through grounding breath, her hands steady, despite the shaking inside her. They worked in silence until Mira placed her palm along his thigh and said softly, Let it rise, Elias. Breathe. He did, slowly, painfully. and something inside him answered. His thigh contracted in tension, turning into movement more pronounced than any attempt before. Mira gasped, tears flooding her eyes. "You are standing up inside your body. Do you feel that?" Elias swallowed, his voice breaking. "Mira." She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Do not talk, just feel." It lasted only seconds, but it felt like a lifetime of grief and hope colliding. When it passed, Elias slumped, but Mira caught him before he fell, guiding him gently against her. Her arms wrapped around him, not as a therapist, not as a partner in healing, but as someone who cared deeply beyond the rules between them. He leaned into her, his forehead pressing lightly against her shoulder, breath shaking. "I cannot protect you from Cross," he whispered. Mira held him tighter. "Then do not. Stand with me. Not in front of me, not behind me, with me." They stayed like that for a long moment, suspended in a fragile sanctuary, carved from fear and courage. And outside, beyond the gates, the man who had destroyed Elias' life stepped back into the world with a smile that promised he was not done yet. The days that followed blurred into a tense quiet, the kind that settled between two people, standing on the edge of something beautiful and dangerous all at once. Mira arrived early every morning, despite the warnings, despite the swelling online hatred, despite knowing Jameson Cross was free and prowling the city like a shadow hunting unfinished business. Elias hated that she walked through those gates each day, but he could not deny the truth that her presence was the only thing keeping him from spiraling back into the darkness he thought he had escaped. They kept training, but something had changed in both of them. A deeper urgency threaded between each breath, each tremor, each moment their hands touched. Elias could feel his body responding with increasing clarity, the signals once faint, now glowing like embers waking beneath ash. By the third day after Cross release, another breakthrough struck. So suddenly, Elias nearly wept from the shock of it. Mira had her hands along the outer line of his thigh, guiding the movement pattern she had been teaching him for weeks, when a sudden contraction rippled through his leg, stronger than any before, and for the first time a muscle in his calf responded. Mira gasped, her hand jolting in surprise. "Elias, do you feel that?" His breath shuddered. Yes, I feel it." Mira's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, breathless with awe. "Your body is remembering faster now. This is huge." But the joy lasted only moments because Marcus rushed into the room again. Urgency written across his face. "Sir, you need to see this." Mira's spine stiffened, the air vibrating with tension. Marcus swiped open a tablet, projecting a video onto the wall. The screen flickered into the image of the Grant Foundation's secondary rehearsal hall, the one Mira often used for warm-ups. Except the room was not empty. The camera footage showed a man inside, wearing a dark jacket, pacing with a deliberate, calculating slowness. Jameson Cross. Even through the grainy security angle, his presence radiated coldness. He looked around the room with an expression of smug hate, kicking at a fallen stool, inspecting the mirrors, as if searching for something. Then he turned toward the camera, lifted his hand, and tapped 2 fingers to his forehead in a mock salute. A message. Elias felt cold spread through him like poison. How did he get inside? Marcus ran a hand down his face. Back service door. He snuck in, posing as a contractor. Security caught him minutes later, but he was calm, almost pleased with himself. Mira's breath trembled, but she held her ground. "He is taunting you, Elias, trying to scare you back into silence. Elias stared at the screen, jaw tight, then let him try. Mira turned to him softly. Fear is what he feeds on, but courage terrifies men like him. Before Elias could answer, Marcus spoke again, voice low. Sir, there is more. Cross issued a public statement this morning. Elias exhaled sharply, bracing himself. Marcus projected the statement across the screen. Jameson Cross claimed he was set up by the Grant family, that the fire was an accident, that Caleb's death was a tragic misinterpretation, that Elias was using his injury for public sympathy. Mira felt sick. He is rewriting history, she whispered, trying to undo the truth. Elias' eyes darkened with a fury she had never seen in him before. If he wants the truth, he will have it. Mira touched his hand, slowly, carefully. We do this on your terms, not his. But Cross was not done. That afternoon, the mansion went into lockdown as threats poured in. Through anonymous accounts, some aimed at Elias, most aimed at Mira. Leave him alone, dancer girl. Stay away from him, or you will regret it. She read each message with a calmness she did not entirely feel. Her fear was not for herself, but for what this was doing to Elias. She found him in the study, staring at a photo of Caleb, a rare candid shot of the two brothers laughing before a beach bonfire. He looked younger in it, lighter, full of promise. Neither of them knew would soon burn. When Elias heard Mira enter, he did not turn around. He spoke softly as if confessing to the air. I cannot lose you. Mira stepped closer until she stood beside him. You are not losing me, but you cannot carry all this alone, Elias, and you cannot protect me by pushing me away. He closed his eyes, pain etched into his features. I do not know how to do this. She touched his hand gently. Then let us learn together. The next morning, Mira went to the foundation building to retrieve a binder of emotional mapping notes she kept in a locked cabinet. Elias insisted she take security with her, but she refused, knowing too many guards would draw attention. She promised to text the moment she arrived, but the message never came. Elias tried to focus on his exercises, but after 30 minutes, panic clawed through him, sharp, merciless. Marcus tried to reassure him. Sir, she is probably caught in traffic. But Elias knew something was wrong. He ordered the car immediately. When they reached the foundation building, the security guards were crowded around an elevator Mira often used. A phone lay on the floor, cracked. Mira's. Elias felt ice in his veins. Where is she? One guard swallowed. The cameras caught someone taking her from the rehearsal hall. Elias' world stopped. Show me. They watched the footage in horror as Jameson Cross stepped into view, grabbing Mira from behind, covering her mouth, dragging her through the side hallway. She fought, but Cross overpowered her, slamming her into the wall, before hauling her into the service elevator. Elias grasped the arms of his wheelchair, shaking with fury and terror. Marcus called the police immediately, but Elias was already moving toward the door. Sir, where are you going? To her. Marcus stared at him, helpless. Sir, you cannot. You are not physically able to. But Elias' voice cut through the air like steel. I will crawl if I have to. They tracked Cross to the abandoned south wing of the building, the same wing shut down after renovations halted post-fire. Elias rolled inside the dark corridor, heart-pounding muscles, trembling but mind burning with one truth. He would not lose someone else, not her. A soft, muffled cry echoed from the far corner of the rehearsal hall. Elias pushed forward faster than he thought possible, the wheels jerking over the uneven floor. There, in the center of the darkened room, Mira sat bound to a support beam. Her cheek bruised, her breathing uneven, but her eyes fierce, alive, fighting. Cross stood in front of her, smiling the same cold smile Elias remembered from the fire. "You took everything from me, Grant," he said, "and now I take something from you." Elias felt something primal rise inside him, a force he had not felt since before the explosion. He pushed his wheelchair forward, but Cross kicked it, flipping it onto its side, sending Elias crashing to the floor. Pain exploded through his ribs, but the fear did not win. Mira screamed his name, struggling violently against the ropes. Cross crouched beside Elias, gripping his hair, lifting his face. "Look at you," he sneered. "Still broken, still useless, still alive only because someone else died for you." Something inside Elias snapped, not with despair, with fire, with purpose, with a strength born from every breath Mira had taught him to face every tremor, every tear, every moment of truth he had fought through. He planted his palms on the floor, feeling the muscles in his core ignite. Mira saw it, tears streaming down her face. "Elias, do not." But he did. He pushed, first an inch, then another, his torso rising his hips, lifting as he locked his elbows. Cross froze stunned. Elias kept pushing, breath, ragged face, contorted in agony, but determination burning through him like a second heartbeat. He shifted his weight into his thighs, the way Mira taught him, his body trembling violently but responding. A spark in his left leg fired, then another. His muscles contracted, holding him for a brief, impossible second. Mira sobbed, "Elias, you are standing." He rose, not fully, but enough to look Cross in the eye, from a place higher than the floor, higher than despair, a place he had not stood from in years. With that last flicker of strength, he shoved Cross backward, sending him stumbling. The doors burst open as police flooded the room, tackling Cross, restraining him. Mira choked on a sob as they freed her from the ropes, running straight to Elias as he collapsed into her arms. She held him, cradling his head against her shoulder, whispering his name over and over as if she were calling him back from the dead. He breathed her in, his voice shaking. "I stood, Mira, for you, for me, for Caleb." She held him tighter, and heartbreak and pride braided in her voice. "You stood because you finally believed you could." The officers carried Cross out of the building, and the paramedics checked both of them, but Elias could not take his eyes off Mira. Her face, her trembling hands, her breath unsteady. And when they asked who she was to him, Elias answered without hesitation, "She is the reason I am alive." And for the first time, the world would soon see him, not as a tragedy, but as a man learning to rise again. 6 months later, the world had shifted in ways neither of them could have predicted, and yet everything about the shift felt quietly inevitable. Like the way dawn always finds its way through even the smallest cracks of night, Grant Foundation's annual winter showcase was hours from starting, and backstage hummed with nervous dancers, soft laughter, and the warm glow of dim work lights. But in the center of the stage, where a single spotlight waited like a held breath, there stood something new, something the world had not seen in years. A pair of crutches, polished silver, placed deliberately, as if marking a sacred threshold. Mira arrived first, her hair pulled into a soft knot, her dress simple, the color of candlelight, and her eyes full of a calm that only comes after surviving a storm you never imagined you could weather. She touched the wooden floor with her toe, letting it glide in a gentle half-circle. A dancer's instinct, the floor greeting her like an old friend. Her new studio, the Caleb Movement Center, had opened that same morning, and already families lined the halls. Kids with braces, dancers rebuilding strength, elders rediscovering motion, mothers cheering at every small victory. It was everything she dreamed of, everything she wanted. To give back a place where broken bodies were not tragic, but simply unfinished, where movement was an invitation to live again and not a test of worth. When Elias appeared in the wings, he paused, gripping the curtain for balance, though he did not need it the way he once had. Mira saw him, and her breath caught, not because he looked handsome, though he did, in a dark suit fitted carefully for his posture, but because he was standing with one crutch tucked under his arm and the other held loosely in his hand, like an afterthought, not a necessity. The audience was not inside, yet no one was watching except her, and maybe that was why his smile softened into something she had only ever seen in private, the kind of smile a man wore when he knew he had crossed an ocean he once feared. He stepped toward her slowly, deliberately, each movement a quiet act of rebellion against the past that tried to define him. Mira moved to him instinctively, fingertips lightly brushing his jaw, as if checking he was real. "You walked in here without telling me," she whispered, breathless with pride and disbelief. Elias exhaled a shaky laugh, his voice low. "I wanted you to see it like this. Unannounced, unwarned, just a man walking toward the woman he loves." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears back, not wanting to blur this moment. She had imagined this countless times, him stepping forward, his body remembering its courage. But none of those imaginings compared to the reality of watching Elias Grant walk to her using his crutch, not as a prison, but as a promise, a partner in motion. He offered her his free hand. "Come with me." She slid her fingers into his, letting him lead her toward the center of the stage, where the spotlight warmed the floor in a soft circle of gold. When they reached it, Elias stopped, his chest rising and falling with quiet emotion. "This is where everything began," he murmured. "The stage, the light, the night I thought I died inside." Mira squeezed his hand. "And the night you began to live again," she said. For a moment they simply stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the building and the distant chatter of guests arriving outside. Then Elias shifted, turning fully to face her. "Mira, I have spent years believing I was a ghost, walking through a life that was never meant for me. You pulled me out of that grave. You taught my body how to feel again, but more than that, you taught my heart how to hope." She felt a tremor ripple through him, not from fear, but from the vulnerability of someone who no longer hid behind steel or silence. Elias slipped his hand into his jacket, and Mira froze, because she knew that look, the softness in his eyes, the fragile bravery. When he lowered himself onto one knee, the spotlight brightened as if it too understood. Mira gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "Elias." He lifted the small velvet box, but he did not open it yet. Not until she met his gaze, refusing to look away from the truth inside it. "I am not asking you to save me," he whispered. "I am asking you to walk with me through whatever comes next. I am asking you to be the reason I keep rising. I am asking you to marry me." Mira's tears finally broke, slipping down her cheeks like light spilling over glass. She dropped to her knees with him, cupping his face in both hands, unable to breathe from joy. "Yes," she whispered against his forehead. "Yes, Elias, 1,000 times yes." He closed his eyes as relief and love washed through him, stronger than any applause he had ever known. When he opened the box, the ring caught the spotlight, casting a soft blue glow like a heartbeat of its own. Mira let him slide it onto her finger, her smile trembling with wonder. They leaned into each other, foreheads touching breath, mingling hearts steady and full. Outside the doors opened the audience filing in, unaware that on stage, a man who once believed he was broken had just risen into a future he never thought he deserved. Mira whispered softly. "You did not heal me," Elias said. She smiled, knowing the line. "I know. You remembered you were not dead." And then he kissed her under the spotlight. The same place where pain was born, and the same place where love rose to rewrite everything. If you are still here right now, holding your breath in that soft glow of the spotlight with Elias and Mira, then I want you to take one tiny moment for yourself, because stories like this are not just stories, they are reminders that broken does not mean finished, and love does not arrive only when life looks perfect. Sometimes it arrives, limping, crawling, trembling, fighting. Through fear, but it arrives anyway, and when it does, it changes everything. And if this story touched you even for a heartbeat, if a scene made your chest tighten, or your eyes warm, or your own memories whisper back to you, then I hope you can do one simple thing for me and for this channel. Tap that like button, not because of algorithms, not because I asked nicely, but because every like pushes this little story further into the world. So someone out there who needs this exact kind of hope might find it the way you just did. And if you want more stories like this, more wounded hearts, more impossible odds, more slow-burning connections, more billionaire love arcs that are not about wealth but about worth, then make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss when the next chapter drops. I promise you this is only the beginning. Here at Emma's Stories, we tell romance the way real hearts feel, it messy, honest, trembling, brave, full of shadows, full of light, full of two people learning how to choose each other even when the world tells them not to. And while you are here, tell me something in the comments. Truly, I read them all. Where are you watching from tonight? What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the first time Elias whispered stop under the spotlight? Was it the moment Mira held him through the tremor? Or the second he took that step toward her, refusing to let fear keep him seated? Your words matter more than you think, because this channel is not just me telling stories, it is us building a community of people who still believe in love, even when life tries to harden us. If you want to go even deeper, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that healing is not a straight line, that falling is allowed, that standing up again even once can rewrite a lifetime. Share it with a friend, a sister, a partner, someone who might need to remember that they are allowed to feel again, allowed to hope again, allowed to love again, even if their heart has been quiet for years. And if you want to support Emma's Stories in a bigger way, stay with us for the next story, because each one is crafted with care, shaped with heart, and built to make you feel something real. You being here means the world to me. So thank you for listening, thank you for feeling, thank you for believing that romance stories still matter. Because when we tell stories like this, we are not escaping the world. We are remembering how beautiful it can be. Till the next tale, my friend, keep your heart open, your hope alive, and your soul soft enough to be moved. I will see you in the next story, and I cannot wait to meet you there.